Ready.
Cool. So, we are live, and this is the Synth Society Summit, hosted by Southern California Synth Society, the SoCal Synth Society, moderated by myself, B-Boy Tech, and Travarsi. This particular session here is the Bitwig session, diving into the grid with Thavius Beck. And we have my man Thavius Beck here. How you doing, Thavius?
I'm doing good, man. I'm happy, excited. I got a bunch of gear. I've been playing around, making weird sounds all day. So I can't complain. I'm feeling good, man.
No doubt, no doubt. And we also got Alex from WMD in the place. What's up, Alex?
Yo, what's up? How you guys doing?
Good to have you, man. And what's up? Go for it.
Yeah, super excited to talk about Bitwig. I love the modular integration, and it's just been a cool day already, so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, man, and just to kind of give people an idea, the thing that we're sort of doing is this whole Synth Society Summit, because there's a lot of Synth societies out there, and we wanted to get everybody together and kind of have almost like a virtual conference. You know what I mean? And I think what Bitwig has done with the grid and all of the sort of CV stuff that they have in there and the other tools and stuff that they have in there, I think is dope. And the fact that we have, Thavius Beck, who has taught Bitwig courses and that sort of thing, I thought this would be a dope way to do this. So I'm going to actually just hand it over to Thavius, and you can just show us what's up with Bitwig. I'll put the screen back up on the share if you want.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Let's show everybody the madness here. And so basically, just to kind of give you guys an overview of like what you're looking at right now. Let me just make sure I got this in focus. Bitwig has been around for quite a while, but there's been a brand new beta version that just got released. There's a beta for Bitwig 3.2. And it introduces a few new features, some new devices and whatnot. But ultimately, what I'm going to show you is fundamentally the same if you're using the currently available version, which is, I think, 3.1.3. The biggest thing with Bitwig 3 is the introduction of 2 different grid devices. And I've got this, I've been playing around with this all day because I'm just a geek. This is the first day I've had like to myself to do my thing. So I kind of went crazy. I was trying out some different modules that are inside the grid. I put together this crazy device, and I'm not going to like dive into how this is all set up right now. I'm going to start from scratch, but just to kind of give you an idea of like some things that are possible, I'm going to activate this device. And what I want you all to realize is that this is going to run with no MIDI notes, no incoming messages from some external device. There's no clip that's going to play. In fact, if you look at the top of the screen, this is Bitwig's transport, and I'm not even going to run it. Once I activate this device, you'll just hear a bunch of stuff going on. So let me go down here. I'm going to show the device panel. The device that we're looking at right now is called Polygrid. And Polygrid is basically like, I know there's a lot of people using Eurorack gear, using different modular setups that are watching. So think of the Polygrid as basically like a virtual modular playground that you can route any way you want and make anything you want. So with that said, here's a quick example, and then we'll start with the basics. So let me turn this on. So let me see if I can kind of slowly walk through this. I'm gonna turn the volume down a bit so I can hear me better over the madness. So basically the way the grid works, you can generate signals, either triggers or gates. You can route those different signals to oscillators, to samplers. You can manipulate the phase of these devices. You can manipulate the pitch, and you can route basically anything to anything else. So I'm combining the sound of a sampler with something that's happening with this triangle oscillator, and just running it through a bunch of different stuff. And the results are pretty cool. So what's great about this is that, like, if you're someone who thinks in a more, how can I put it? If you're already using modular devices, if you're already like, dealing with the Eurorack type system, the way the grid works will be really familiar to the way that you're patching different things already. If not, it's cool because you can start with a really basic setup, which is what I'm going to do in just a second. Let me go ahead and open up a new blank project here. You can start with something really, really simple and then just add layers of complexity as you go. So I'm going to add an instrument track here. And if I go into the instruments, I'll just type in poly up here at the top, P-O-L-Y. So there's a polygrid, which is essentially an instrument, and you can create any instrument that you want. And then there's also another device that's called the effects grid. If I look in audio effects and I just type in grid, there's the effects grid. So the effects grid will take incoming audio, and then you can add a lot of the same modules to create any sort of audio effect that you want. So I'm going to focus on the polygrid just because that's what I've been doing all day. So let me bring this up in here. And when you got the polygrid, so for those of you not familiar with Bitwig, the main thing, I'm not trying to get into like something that's very specific about the way Bitwig works in general. That's like a much bigger discussion. But I think the best way to think about what are the benefits of using this is that in terms of sound design, manipulating sound, creating things from scratch, I don't really know another piece of software that lets you do as much with native tools. These tools are integrated into the program. They're not from some like third-party pack or like some, this stuff is part of Bitwig natively. And because of that, it all works really, really well. And in my experience, it sounds good, So let me go ahead and I'm going to hit this button down here. So my polygrid is here. This area on the bottom is called the device panel, and the polygrid is a device. I want to expand the device so I can see the inside of it. And yeah, you know what? Yeah, we'll do the same thing. I'm not even going to add any sort of clips or anything here. We're just going to build a basic idea by generating some messages and triggers inside of the grid. So I'm gonna hit this button here, and now I can see inside of my grid. On the left side of the screen over here, this thing is called an inspector panel. So any devices you bring in, there's going to be certain things over here that will let you influence how that device works. Another thing that's really amazing about Bitwig is the modulation system, which is separate from the modules I'm going to play with in here. So things like LFOs, envelopes, all types of different ways to modulate different signals. You can add those to any device at any point that you want and make them manipulate anything. Here's a whole series of different modulators that will let you manipulate and change parameters. And I'm not even going to get into all that. I'm just going to do stuff inside the grid. But this is just another feature that makes Bitwig really amazing. So anyway, here's my polygrid. And inside the polygrid, what you start with is you start with an oscillator. In this case, this is a triangle oscillator. I'm imagining most people watching are probably pretty familiar with synthesis, but if you're not, our sound is going to be generated from a triangle oscillator. It's going to generate this waveform, and we'll cycle through this waveform a certain number of times per second based on the pitch that we play. The output of this circle here is showing the audio out. All right, the audio output is connected to a volume envelope. Now, if I want to replace this volume envelope, if you see up here at the top, there's a bunch of different categories for different modules you can add. And if I go to the envelopes here, I've got a few different choices for envelopes. I've got some envelope followers I'll point out in a second, but I'll stick with this for now. All right. And then this is going to output directly to the audio out. So whatever's connected to this is what we're going to hear coming out of the device. So like I said, really quickly, I don't want to add any MIDI notes. I don't want to play anything manually. I want everything to happen in the grid. So I think what could be cool just to start off with is I'm going to go ahead and go to a category here called data. I should also point out too that if I want to add stuff, I could just right click in the grid, and then I got a pop-up menu here and I can select stuff and add it that way. But I just want you to visually see what these different modules are. So all of these things can be connected in different ways. I'm going to grab this gates module, and this is going to allow me to generate logic gates. All right. I can either have a gate trigger that will trigger something, or I can have a gate message, or I can trigger something and basically have the gate stay open for a certain amount of time. In this case, what I want to do is I want this gates device to trigger my volume envelope. All right. That's the way that I'm going to hear what this oscillator is doing. If I want to do that, you see there is a yellow circle here. And underneath that, there's a little icon. These things are called pre-chords. So say, for instance, if I did want to play this with a keyboard, I wouldn't have to add anything else. This pre-chord here means that this envelope will already be triggered by MIDI messages. So just as an example, let me see. Is my keyboard on here? Is it on? I don't think. Oh, there we go. Let me see. I got to arm the track. Aha, that would probably help. So let me go ahead and bring this down. Sometimes it's a lot to keep track of, right? So let me go over here. All right. So now if I turn that on. All right. So if I'm using a MIDI keyboard, I can easily just trigger the volume envelope if this thing is enabled. This is a pre-chord, meaning it's just going to receive gate messages from notes that I play. But let's say I don't want to do that. I'm going to just turn this off. And instead, I'm going to connect the output of this gate device directly to the trigger input here. So now you see the pattern that's being generated here is triggering the volume envelope. Okay, cool. Now I think I do want to replace this volume envelope with something that's a bit more of a pluck. I can right click here, and then I have options to replace it with something else. And look, there's the aptly named pluck. I'm going to go ahead and choose this. Shape the volume envelope a bit. So get a quick volume spike. It quickly decays, something like that. Now, I think what I'd also like to do is maybe combine this with something else. All right, I could combine this oscillator with a different oscillator and blend the outputs of both and have them both output to my little device over here. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to right click under my triangle oscillator here, go to my little menu. I want an oscillator, but I want a different type of oscillator. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose, let's do swarm. This one's on here. So you see I got two different waveforms that I can choose between, and then I have some parameters to manipulate how this is going to sound. So I want something a bit brighter to go with this. I'll choose the sawtooth. I want this to go through a different type of envelope, and I think I might want both of these to output through a filter as well. So first things first, let me go ahead and add another envelope. In this case, maybe I'll just go with an AD envelope, attack, decay, similar to the pluck. I'm going to output this here. I use this same gate module to trigger the volume envelope here. Now, if I want to hear both of these at the same time, I'm going to have to use some sort of either mixer or something to blend the signals. I'm going to go ahead and add a mixer before we get to the output here. So let me right click, and mix is here, and here's a mixer. With the mixer, I can connect it to 6 different signals and blend them together, and then they all have individual volume control. I can pan left and right, mute and solo. So I want to have the mixer basically go in between the output of this envelope and the input of this audio out device. So what I could do is just simply drag this where I want to insert it into the signal chain. And there we go. I want the output of this to go into the second input of my mixer. I'll just drag it there. All right, so now we got both of those blended together, going into the mixer. So let's take this a step further. And actually, you know what? Let me add, where is my level? I'm going to add an attenuate device as well. So I can just turn it down from here when I want to talk over it. All right, cool. In addition to all this, and please don't hesitate to stop me because I'm gonna just keep talking and just showing stuff. I'd like to be able to visualize what's happening here with all of this. So I'm gonna grab, if I go into the display here, I'm gonna grab a cute little oscilloscope and we're gonna throw this right at the output of the mixer. All right, so now I can get a visual idea of what's happening with the audio. All right. If I wanted to, I could see the output of both of these oscillators separately. If instead of coming out of the mixer, I could come out of both of the envelopes separately, and then I could input them both here. I should probably just show you that. Let's just go ahead and do this. And instead, we'll bring that there. And we'll put this here. And now we can see them both. Let's say I want these to be different colors so that it's easier to distinguish which one is which. It's pretty simple to do. I can select the module. I go over to the left. I can choose a different color. And now it's pretty clear which one is which. All right, so let's just move this off to the side here. Okay, now if it just kept doing this, this would get pretty repetitive and boring. So I want to add some modulation, make some things change here. So what I'm going to do, let me go ahead and turn this down a bit. Modulation is a super important aspect of Bitwig. It's one of the most fundamental things about what makes it unique is the ability, well, there's many things, but the focus on adjusting and manipulating the phase of different devices is pretty huge. And I'm going to incorporate some of that in a bit. But first, let me turn this back up. I'd like to modulate some stuff that's happening with the triangle oscillator and the swarm oscillator. Let me turn this back up. If I adjust these two parameters, there's skew and fold for the triangle, just so you can hear what happens. So something like that could be kind of cool. For the swarm device here, swarm module. this spread might be a bit much, but maybe something like that could be cool. The other thing is that I can also slightly detune these. Basically, I can turn on this plus minus here. It's like a bipolar switch. And if I do this, as you see, it's floating, this little window's floating. I can invert the frequency for the right channel. I can slightly detune them against each other, and then you get this nice kind of chorusy sound. It's similar to activating unison and then slightly detuning the voices that get generated. So I'm gonna do something like that, and then we'll start to modulate some things here. So let me turn this back up. I'll turn this on here. Let me solo the triangle so you can really hear what's about to happen. So I've slightly detuned one of the channels of audio, the right channel. So now I have a slightly wider kind of chorusy sound. Before I leave this, what I'd like to do as well is bring in something where I can modulate these parameters automatically. So let me just bring in my trusty LFO here. So I've got a regular LFO. Most of you understand what this is, a low frequency oscillator. If I look in the left side of the screen, my inspector panel here, any module that I hover over, I'm going to see information about what it does and which signals it's generating. So right now my LFO is generating a triangle waveform, and I can use this to modulate something. Before I change anything here, let's just set this up. In Bitwig, anything that can be used to modulate something else usually will have this little icon here. Okay, there's a circle and an arrow. If I click on this, everything that I can modulate with this is highlighted in this like kind of bluish sort of color. And to modulate these things, I can click and hold on a parameter I want to modulate and adjust it by the amount I want it to be modulated. So let me turn this back up. Now that I've explained it, I want y'all to hear what's happening. So maybe we'll do this the opposite direction. Something like that. And I think I want to slow this down a bit. The rate for my LFO is here. Let's make this maybe every 2 bars. All right, cool. You notice here with the LFO, I have this same, what looks like a bipolar switch. This will also let me invert the phase of one of the channels here. So if I want the LFO to operate in a wider, more stereo kind of way, I could do that. I could turn this on. And do something like that. Let me adjust this here. Okay, cool. Now, the thing with this is that with the LFO, and in fact, I should point this out as well. So one of the best things that Bitwig has done in terms of helping people understand what's going on with the grid and just in general, in this inspector panel, which I can show and hide by pressing the I button on my keyboard. There we go. There's a show help button. So any module that I'm selecting, I can hit show help. And what's really cool about this is that you can't really tell here, but I'll show you in a second. This is the actual device that's in my grid. So if I change anything while I'm looking at the help, I'm going to hear the result. So here's a good example before I go into what I was going to show you.
Wow, that's kind of dope.
It's insane, right? So let's say, for instance, what would be useful to, we'll just go here. No, let's do the triangle because this is solo. I hit show help, and you see there's my modulation happening. It's pointing out what everything does. And if I adjust something, I hear that change in real time as I'm seeing the help.
Crazy.
Yeah, Bitwig, they really killed it with this, dude. I speak on it because I really like it. But all right,
so help aspect.
The help aspect, it's dope, right?
Yeah.
And shameless plug here, I will point this out as well. If you go into this button up here is for the dashboard of Bitwig. If you go into the help menu, there's a bunch of stuff that they include as far as tutorials. And if you scroll down, you can see a lot of my own content that I did for Mac Pro Video.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Shameless plug. See, I love them.
You know what's dope about that though, Thavius, is that a lot of times you get stuff, whether it's software, hardware, whatever, you buy this stuff and you want to learn it and want to dive in, and you have to go away from the thing that you're trying to learn it. This is dope that they kind of have that built in there.
Well, to me, what's cool about it is that it just keeps you focused on creating. So instead of feeling stuck, even if you don't understand what the module is at all, you can at least click, go to show help, know what the inputs are, know what the outputs are, And as you're tweaking things, you can see the description right there. You know, it's genius, honestly. I don't know why other companies haven't done this, but if they do, they bit Bitwig. So there you go.
Yeah, it's so cool you can do that in real time while reading. That's amazing.
Exactly.
I didn't realize that. I just never even tried to touch that. I just figured it was a picture. Looks great.
The crazy thing about it too is that they have this now not just for stuff in the grid, but also for just anything in Bitwig. So if you open up one of the synths or whatever, you go in the inspector panel, there's also a show help button, and it works the same way. You know, it's nuts. But all right, so real quick, because I also want to like throw a sample in here. The sampler in Bitwig is nuts. So I'll show you that as well. But I want to spice this up. This is getting kind of repetitive. So what I'd like to do here, with the LFO device, I mentioned this button here. I can click on this, use this as a modulation source, and then click on something to modulate it by a certain amount. You also have this button here, which is also a modulation output. But what's cool about this, I talked about phase, right? If you look over here in the inspector panel, this is the signal coming out of the LFO. So that's the shape of the waveform. And let's say that maybe I want to take this shape and manipulate it in some way without changing anything inside of the LFO. I can go up to my phase category, and all of these things up here are going to help me adjust and manipulate the phase. So for those of you who are unaware, or maybe phase seems kind of a vague concept, if you look at this waveform, like I said, it's a triangle. When we're talking about phase, one complete wave cycle, one complete cycle of this waveform, imagine that we're starting at the number 0 and the end of the wave cycle is basically, let's say 1, right? So with these phase devices, I can manipulate how much time it takes to get from 0 to 1, or the direction of the phase. I can alter the waveform. There's a lot of things I can do with this, and it's pretty easy. So I'm using this modulator to do some stuff with the LFO, and I'm going to output this to one of these phase devices so I can tweak what's happening with the waveform. I'm going to grab this sine mod device because it's very easy to hear the craziness that happens here. And I'm going to connect the output of my LFO to the input of the sine mod here. Now, right now, I've clicked on this, and you see it says phase out. This is a flat line. So we need to connect this to something that generates phase. And now I see the input coming from my LFO. Here's the output based on us modulating the phase. Now, you're not really going to notice anything until I actually like map this to something else. So let's play around with this in a few different ways. I'm going to turn this up. You notice that certain inputs and outputs are colored. All right. Anything that's directly related to phase is going to be purple. And if I look at the triangle oscillator, there's a phase input here. If I look at the swarm oscillator, there's a phase input here. But more importantly, if I look at this Gates device, there's also a phase input. You see this circle with the diagonal line. So this is another pre-chord, which means that this is just generating phase. Basically, every single bar, we complete one wave cycle going through this gate module. And what I want to do is, instead of using the phase that's being generated naturally, I want to use the phase coming from this LFO. That'll influence the direction that we go with this. So let me go ahead and deactivate that. I'm going to turn up my attenuator here so you can hear it. And I'm going to set this up so it starts generating phase normally, and then I'll mess with this so you understand just how interesting this can be. So let's connect that like so. So you see right now we're not moving forward like we were before. It's going forward and backwards because it's following the phase here. All right, going up and then down and then down and then back up. So I'm going to start to adjust, basically modulate this more. And let me shorten that. There we go. And this as well. So I can completely kind of randomize this pattern that's happening by adjusting the phase that is driving this module here. All right. Now, with that said, I'm gonna just have this happen in the background. I'd like to maybe add some delay to this as well. So let me grab a delay device, and I'm gonna add that to my third input here. All right. I'm gonna right click here, and where is delay? Here we go. I'm gonna grab something called the mod delay, because it'll let me modulate it in some cool ways. And I think I want to take the output of both of these, run it through the delay. and then output that through another mixer because why not? So I'll take the output of the mixer here. Let me unsolo this. Connect that to the mod delay. And then I'm going to put another mixer here because I want to blend this with a sampler module in a bit. Do something like this. And we'll connect this. What is it? Oh, here we go. I want to connect that there. Connect this here. Connect both of those there. All right. So let me solo this now. This is the output coming from this delay. And what I'd like to do is increase the feedback amount here. And with this input, I can modulate the speed of the delay. All right, I can basically make it speed up and slow down like a tape delay. I don't hear anything yet. This is the amount that it'll be modulated. So just for the sake of, let's go ahead and use, where's my LFO at? It's way over there. All right, it's gonna be kind of sloppy cabling, but just let's do it. I'm just gonna connect this like so. So now you can hear the pitch of the delay being affected by the LFO here. Now, another thing I think I'd like to do, because I don't want these to sit right on top of each other, next to my volume, I have this where I can pan it left and right. So I'd like to do like an auto pan type thing. I think that'd be cool. So I can bring in yet another LFO. And you see, the rabbit hole gets deep, right? But that's the thing that's fun about this, is you can take this as far as you want to. As long as you can think through creating the patch, you can make it. So I'm gonna just grab another LFO just to keep this simple. I guess we'll throw this on top of the mixer here. And I want to cycle through a sine wave, let's say, yeah, every 1 bar. I'll choose this waveform here. I'll just use this modulator. Output. I want this to be bipolar, so it goes above and below the value it's set at. So I'm going to click this button here. So now I got a little auto pan thing happening there. And let me see, what else might I want to do? This is a little bit busy in terms of how it sounds. So I think another thing that could be useful is maybe I should probably apply a filter. Maybe I could use a bandpass filter just for the output of the delay. So let's do it. I'm going to go ahead and grab a filter. There's a new filter that just got added, this XP filter. And I'm going to try this out. Let me move stuff out of the way. And again, I want to just insert it in the signal path here. So I'll just grab this, drop it there. That's nice. What's cool about all the filters in Bitwig is there's a button here. Let me just turn this down a bit. Not a button. There's a triangle here. So with this filter, we have the cutoff frequency here, and this is the resonance. If I turn up the resonance enough, the filter basically becomes self-oscillating. It's going to generate a pitch. And I know the point at which it will do that because this triangle tells me that the resonance is at 100%, and then I can go above it. So it's cool because the filter also has a pitch input, and you can essentially almost use this like a synth itself. If you make this respond to incoming pitches, turn the resonance up a lot, you can treat it like its own oscillator. I don't know if I'm gonna do that just yet. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see where this goes. Let me solo this. I think I want to go, like I said, for something more of a bandpass here. So you can hear that.
Goodness.
Mm-hmm. So let me see if I can get this to give me a tone that'll match. Something like that. It's close. That works. Okay, I can do that. I can do that. All right. One more thing I'm going to do before I move on to messing with the sampler, because I love manipulating samples, is there is a new module that just got added. If I go to the shaper category, there's a bunch of different wave shapers here you can use to just make things sound wild and crazy and aggressive, which I like. The Saturator module just got added. It looks pretty unassuming when you see it here, but if you look in the inspector panel on the left, there's a lot of goodness here. All right, so I'm just really diving into this, but basically there's a high threshold and a low threshold, and you can manipulate how much you saturate things going above or below certain volumes. So let's just see what can happen with this. I'm going to connect the output of this mixer here, and then we'll go there. And let me turn this back up. Let me solo this, and let's see, drive this a bit
But
harder.
you know what I want to say about that. What I think is dope is that with this 3.2 update, that the theme is color your sound, right? So adding this saturator and all this kind of stuff, they've really done a good job. Like they did before the grid, now they're focusing on this, and it's just becoming this monster of an environment that you got that you could do just about anything you need to with.
I mean, that's the crazy thing about it, is that, you know, it's one thing to say that you can make any sound that you want, but I mean, you literally can. Like, it's just a matter of thinking through what you want to do and grabbing the modules that let you do it, you know. And every time there's a little update that they add, it's always something significant. You know, I haven't really seen like I guess there's no really like meaningless updates, right? But you know, I'm an Akai user. You know, I think the most recent update for some of the Akai gear was integration with Ableton Live, which for a lot of users wasn't useful if they wanted something more standalone. You know, sometimes you get things where you're like, all right, that doesn't focus on what's going to help me personally. And every single update that I've seen to Bitwig has always been something that should be useful to anyone who's attracted to it in the first place. It all just adds sound design and sound shaping, you know. So and with that said, all right, so this is all like a fun, cool little exercise, but I'm going to just take this a little bit different, in a different direction. I'm going to take all this and I'm going to delete all this, because what I want to do is focus on one of my main things. I love manipulating samples, all right? And Bitwig's sampler is insane. And there's a sampler instrument, and then you have a sample module that basically has all the goodies of the sampler, but inside of the grid environment. So I'm going to show you a really basic way to take advantage of this, which I think should show you some of the other stuff that's possible. So let me go ahead and grab a sampler. And one of my favorite things to do with this is just to throw in like a basic breakbeat or a vocal sample or something and just go crazy and make it something else. So let me browse my samples. I got some trusty breakbeats that I'm sure some of y'all will be familiar with. Let me just go ahead and grab something. Not Elvis. Let me see. Maybe Lou Rawls. Yeah, here we go. Let me just grab this. All right.
Ooh, that classic.
Yep. Now we're about to just mangle this, so don't get too used to it. All right. So we're going to come out of this. I need a volume envelope, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to use an ADSR because I want this to sustain. So we'll just bring that up like so. The output of this will go into here. And actually, before I even do that, I might want to filter in between these two. So let me just grab a filter. I'll keep this simple. I'm going to grab the state variable filter, connect these like so. That's like that, and bam, 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 bam. All right. So in order for this to work, I need to trigger the playback of the sample. Here's a trigger input here. And then I also need to trigger the volume envelope so I can hear the output of it. So just like I did before, I'll just go ahead and use one of these gate devices. And I guess we'll put it here. I have this pre-chord for the phase enabled, so as soon as I drop it in, you can see it's just running. And I only want this to trigger once a bar. So I'll connect the output here. That's going to trigger the sample, but of course I don't hear anything because I'm not triggering the volume envelope. So let's go ahead and grab the same gate and do like so. And this is kind of sloppy. Let's do it like that. And I'm not hearing this because, oh, there you go. See, user error. There we go. Let's turn that up. Now, if I want this to keep playing right now, this gate device, it's a trigger. So it's triggering the volume envelope only on that first step, and then I don't hear it anymore. So I'm going to change this to a gate instead. And then that way I can make it so that the envelope will stay open all that time. All right. Now, the main issue here is this is off beat, clearly, right? And I don't want to have to worry about like trying to figure out the pitch or the tempo or doing some sort of warping or anything like that. I'm going to rely on the stuff that I have here. So what's dope about the sampler is that this sampler has 3 different modes. Basically, you can do, you can essentially use it more like a wavetable synth if you choose cycles. If you want to do granular synthesis, you can do that with textures. And if you want to treat it like a typical sampler, you can use repitch. But what's really, really dope is that over here, you got this little snowflake icon. It's very cute. But if you use this, this will freeze the playhead. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this up I'm going to turn this on to freeze the playhead. Let me just make sure. There we go. So let me hit this. All right. So this is still being triggered once a bar, but we're not hearing it because the playhead position is frozen, and I can adjust the playhead position with this POS. Now, if I choose something other than repitch, let's say I choose textures. So now the playhead position is frozen, but with this textures, I'm basically looping the very beginning part of this. All right. Now, I don't want to do that either. I want to make it so that I can essentially kind of time stretch this, and I want to move through the whole sample once a bar. So let me grab something that'll let me do that. I'll get my trusty LFO once again. And there's various ways to accomplish this, but this is probably the easiest to visually demonstrate. I know that I can use the LFO to modulate other stuff. I want to modulate the position of the playhead, and I want this to basically start at the beginning and smoothly move all the way through the sample every bar. So let me change the LFO speed here to 1 bar. I want to change the shape of the waveforms here to an upward sawtooth, like so. And I'm going to click on this, and you see the playhead position can be modulated. So I'm just going to click here, click there, and move all the way like that. Let me turn this back up. Now, right now, you see Bitwig's not even playing, right? So let me go ahead and I'm going to press play, which will re-trigger the phase on the gate in the LFO. And you know what? Do I have notes going on here? I do not. This is being, figure out why this is being triggered like that. Oh, you know what? Okay, let me turn this preview off. Okay, so now it's going through this once a bar, but it sounds absurd. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the speed of this to 2 bars. And trigger this. Let me see. I want this to be. Let me make sure I can trigger the phase of this properly. I'm going to grab a phase in device. This is going to take the incoming phase from Bitwig. Basically, this is, you see when I select this, this is generating a 1 bar phase signal. And I want to make this twice as long. And I'm essentially going to use this to, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to re-trigger? Oh, that's what I can do. I'm going to bring in, see, this is the thing. You got to think through these patches, right? What I'd like to do is I want to make it so that I can output a trigger once every, I think, 2 bars. I have a trigger module here. Right now, this is taking the phase from Bitwig, the 1 bar phase. I want to turn that off. Let me see. I'm trying to make sure that I think through this properly. Let me see. Okay, here we go. This is what I want to do. I'm going to take the incoming phase and I'm going to scale this. So where's my phase device? And here we go. So I have a phase scaler. So I'm going to take the incoming phase and we are going to scale this to be twice as long. I connect this here. We have the phase in, the phase out, and the signal in. Here's a ratio. So this is going twice as fast. I want this to go half as fast. So now I look here. Here's the phase in from Bitwig. The phase out is double the length. There we go. All right. And I want this to re-trigger the LFO. And I think, let me see. Make sure this is right. Play this. There we go. All right. I had to make sure I was thinking through this correctly. Okay. So with that done, if I wanted to, let's go ahead and maybe make this even slower. There we go. So again, using this, with the texture mode on, I'm time stretching this sample. Even more. Now I'm using the textures mode here, so I have the grain, basically the size of the small little loop that's occurring. Grain smaller. Something like that. If I turn up the motion, it's basically going to cause some jitter around the playhead. So I can get something like that. If I increase the grain size while the motion is up, I can create basically like rain clouds where I'll go here the result. So kind of like that. And I can easily modulate these parameters if I want to. If I change this to cycles, then I can get something like that. Where basically, you can almost think of this as like a wavetable at this point. We're looping small portions of the audio. If I wasn't moving the playhead position like this, I could isolate each one of those and treat any little portion of this like a single cycle wave. And I can adjust the form in here. Kind of change the texture and the nature of that. So for me, like, again, anything can sound like anything else because all this stuff is so easy to manipulate, and the audio signals can be fed into other things to manipulate phase. If you're savvy, you can figure out a way to generate audio signals from phase devices. It's pretty crazy. But I will say this, because I know most folks watching are watching because there's a lot of modular stuff going on here. Another big thing with Bitwig is that there's native support for anything that generates control voltage. So if I go to the I/O here, this is just inside of the grid. So I'll step outside of the grid in a second and show you some of the other stuff. But you have a CV in, so control voltage. So if you have an interface like expert sleepers, the ES9, things like that, where you can basically receive and send out voltage from your jaw.
Hey, Thavius.
Yeah.
Can you pull the audio down just a bit so we can hear what you're saying?
Oh, my bad. Yeah. I wasn't sure how loud this was. It wasn't as loud in my headphones. Is that better?
Oh, wait, is there synth going on?
There shouldn't be. Oh, you know what? Let me see something. That's why. My bad. Hold on a second. I have, you know what it was?
I got you.
I'm sitting here, my bad. Okay, because my microphone's going through here, and then I have my mono circuit, which was just being triggered hardware. Yeah, let me turn this down. All right, I got too much.
Cool, that's perfect. I can hear you now. Okay. No doubt.
I wasn't even hearing that. I'm like, wait, okay, all right. So this is what was happening. So sometimes it's like that, man. Sometimes it's like that.
It's like,
but yeah, what was I saying here? So, so the CV stuff. Okay. So yeah, so if you have something from any interface that can output or receive, control voltage, you have native support for that in Bitwig. So there's CV in and there's CV out, these two modules here. So if I want to receive control voltage from something outside, some piece of hardware, I could just bring this in. Once I do, you see in the inspector panel, I could choose the input. I don't have an expert sleepers device here, but if I did, I have had in the past for tutorials, I could use this to receive input from something and then send that out to something else. You also have CV out as well. So if I wanted to take the output of any of these audio signals and convert it to voltage and send that out of Bitwig, I could do that as well. And in addition to that, let me go ahead and hit this button here. If I wanted to, let me just add an instrument track. I hit my plus button here and let me type in CV. So you have a hardware CV instrument too. So if you don't necessarily want to go inside of the grid to, get some CV control voltage goodness happening, you got this device here. You have pitch CV out, gate out, and audio in. So all that's contained in this one device. And by hitting this button, I can open up these slots where I can add the modulators from Bitwig to modulate things that are going to the CV gear that I've got, So all these different things from envelopes, a note counter, you have this parameter sequencer. It's just kind of crazy. So obviously, when you first start out with Bitwig, you don't have to dive into all of this. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's really easy to start with the basic idea and just kind of see how far you can go down a rabbit hole. That's what I end up doing every time I pull this out. So, but before I keep talking at y'all, is there any sort of specific thing or I don't know? You tell me. What do your people want to see? Do you have people that are using Bitwig that have reached out to you guys at the SoCal Synth Society, or is this taboo right now?
Well, I saw Alex use. I know that he's an avid user of Bitwig, and I saw him when he performed at our SoCal Synth Society party for NAMM. And I've just been sort of following it in general and seeing how people are using it with modular. So I definitely don't think it's taboo. And so, yeah, I thought it would just be a great topic because from what I can, in my experience, and again, this is my personal experience, using, for example, Ableton versus Bitwig, it just seemed to be a little bit easier for me to use it. It was a little bit more intuitive. That was just my experience with it. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to show that and show how, whether it's in the box and then how people can then use that and kind of branch out.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, like I said, if you're already working with different pieces of hardware and you're patching things together and you're thinking through signal flow like that, working inside of the grid will probably be really, really intuitive. And it ultimately just depends on like what the purpose of using a DAW is for you. You know, for me, I've got a lot of hardware, as you guys heard inadvertently. And, you know, I tend to use a lot of that for my sound sources. But having a DAW where like it's not just about, you know, multi-track recording or like, you know, basic manipulation of sound, to be able to sit in front of something and visually see, okay, here's all these devices, here's unique ways I can patch them. And if I move this here and I do this, it'll change this in this way. It's just a lot of fun, and visually it just makes sense, you know. And if I ever get lost, which does happen because there's a lot of stuff going on here, I can always look in the show help over here. There's a lot of different grid presets where you can just load those up and kind of reverse engineer what's going on. So yeah, it's you know, it's been my DAW of choice for a long time, and it just seems to keep getting better from what I've seen. So
yeah, I think in general, even before the grid, like it just made sense to me as far as how to integrate my hardware with it. You know, the CV instrument and the hardware instruments make a lot of sense. Using it, for me, I've always been looking for a sequencer for my modular and for my hardware that lets me accurately just play a MIDI keyboard in, and especially for like more than 8 bars.
right.
And then mix the two. And I haven't found anything better than just using a computer for that. And Bitwig has made that really easy. And then diving into the grid, I think it's really nice that you can build one, you can use it on the train or on a plane or wherever, you know, you can use it in your bedroom and just on your bed and just messing around with stuff, which is cool just to patch. And then any module that you don't have, you can create here. One of the questions that we got on the chat was about VSTs and using the grid. Like, is there any way to use the modules in the grid to control VST parameters? And then I know you can. I think you can do that with devices, right? You can just pull a VST into a device and put a modulator in there, which is essentially the same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're going to use a VST just as a device, adding modulators is as simple as when you throw a VST in here, you'll see like a third party kind of, well, let me just show you really quickly. Let me see. Let me pull this down, deactivate this. Let me do this. Yeah, for instance, if I'll go to this track here, get rid of this. Let's add something that the kids often enjoy. What is it? Let me see. Do I have Serum in here? There we go. So let's say I add something like Serum. All I have to do is just hit this button. It opens up the modulator slots. All the parameters in Serum show up right here. And the most recent thing that I've touched shows up at the top. So if I want to modulate that, I just grab a modulator, assign it like so, and just like that. It's easy. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's totally worth showing because that's something that's so cool. And being able to do that, add those modulators, and then if you are using the external CV instrument, you can just take that modulator and route it to like a CV output or whatever you want. I mean, it's this whole part of it is so intuitive already to me. And then going into the grid, you know, it's like on top, that's just, you know, added functionality, I guess.
And I have seen, there's a guy that I've been doing lessons with, and he was asking me about being able to use a VST within the signal flow of a grid. And there is a way to do it. It's a bit of a hacky workaround. And I don't know if we have really enough time to kind of go into it, but you could use, what is it? There's DC offset devices, and you can basically use those to recreate the audio signal from some point within the grid. And then you could route that out of the grid and use that in various ways. There's a lot of, like, you can just do a lot, but going into that would probably be a bit difficult to show right now. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to manipulate gear that you already have in Bitwig. You know, you might have like a dormant old synth or something sitting there collecting dust, and being able to use these modules and modulators just adds a whole new way to work with all this stuff. So to me, that's the biggest thing. You know, it's it'll enhance what you already have, or on its own, it's just a great sandbox to play in.
Yeah, that's the cool part. I mean, I wrote I'm releasing a record next Friday. I wrote the entire thing in Bitwig while just like on vacation with a tiny little MIDI controller and its devices. And then I was able to successfully bring all that stuff home and record it with all of my synths here, all my drum machines. I was able to clock my Euro rack, put my Euro rack on it, record everything. I went to LA to the Rosen Sound Vintage Synthesizer Studio and was able to like sequence all of their synths with all the stuff that I had made with it. And it was just a really cool, fun way of doing it. And being able to just like play music and even make patches and stuff while I'm just traveling is awesome. And then being able to bring that back and just integrate all my hardware was pretty seamlessly, to be honest, was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about it too, is that, you know, I've got various computers that I use, but my main like on the Surface Go, and it's the cheapest possible Surface Go with like the most meager processor. There's only 4 gigs of RAM, and I can run Bitwig on it with no problems, and I can get pretty deep. You know, obviously there's going to be limitations based on what's there, but just using the native devices in the grid, I can do a lot. So yeah, it's a similar thing where it's like, you know, maybe you can't bring all your gear with you when you're on the road, but if you got a computer and you have something like this, you're not stuck with just using presets or using you know, limited tools. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty damn full featured right then. I mean, you know, that, and I think that's a prime example of one of the benefits, that you kind of go on the go, take this thing with you. You have all of these tools at your fingertips right there. I mean, think about Alex, the whole album just kind of on vacation. Because he had wig, you know what I mean?
No, exactly. And really just real quick, just to kind of finish up with this, I'm gonna I've been adding like these other modules here. And one of the first things I started doing with Bitwig was just like trying to create drum beats and drum patterns just within the grid, again, without using MIDI notes and stuff like that. And I've got something that might sound like a kick and a snare, or kick and a hi-hat. Let's see what's going on here. All right. So yeah, super basic, but basically the same triangle oscillator that I was playing with before. I'm using an envelope here as a pitch envelope. So I got the output of this, modulating the pitch. The amount that I'm modulating the pitch is determined by this. If I want this to be lower, again, this number down here is the ratio for the pitch. Let's go. Something like that. Bring this up more. So I got a little kick. I have the same gate module triggering the pitch envelope as well as the volume envelope. Do something like that. This module here is another gate module that's triggering the volume envelope that's receiving audio from this noise here. And I'm just using this more as like a hi-hat type sound. Let me go ahead and unmute this. This is going through a very simple high pass device, so I can get rid of some of those lower frequencies. It'd be nice to maybe have more steps for this gate device here, so this isn't just eighth notes. So I can go into the inspector panel, change the step count. Let's go with 16. And then I can do like this. And again, just to take it just a smidge further, because I know we're almost done here, but I can get some modulation happening with this volume envelope. Let me see. And yeah, why not? We'll just go with the trusty. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go with a sample and a hold LFO, which is in random. So that way, this can be a little bit less predictable. And I'm going to modulate the decay of the volume envelope. Like so. We'll make this bipolar. There we go. And I still got this thing going up here. I have no idea if this is actually going to sound good together, but let me just blend it in. And interesting. Okay. It's not terrible. I'm sure there's more things I could do with this to make this sound more interesting, but there we go. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So at this point, I would probably, I don't know, who knows what I would do, but the main thing is that like you can just play around and, whether it's happy accidents or whether you have like a specific idea in mind, anything's possible basically in the grid. So, so there you go.
Dope, man. Yo, that's really dope. I'm glad that you kind of took us through that. That's a lot of good information. I mean, I don't know. I think, see, even with me being just sort of familiar with Bitwig, just the fact that Bitwig is what it is, a dope dog. But now I think this is much more powerful than even I thought. And Alex, I didn't know that that's what you use for your live shows, man. I didn't realize that. I've seen you with your Euro rack and your stuff, and then you have a Surface Pro.
Yeah, so I have a Surface Pro 6. And then for the last show, I used the APC 40. And that was my main controller for it. And it was great. I mean, it's just being able to sequence through. But before I had the APC, I was just using the touchscreen to trigger the clips. And that was amazing. I mean, that was one of the things that really brought me to Bitwig in the beginning was the touchscreen capability, being able to, it has multi-touch interface. So you can actually play chords on it. And like while you're on a plane with no MIDI controller to be able to like actually play out chords is pretty cool. Yeah. I really enjoyed it, have really enjoyed it. And I think it's one of the things I was going to mention, Thavius, is that you were saying, this whole thing's about the grid. And I keep wondering about, I want an instrument to make like auxiliary percussion on top of my music. And I make like house music, electro kind of stuff. And so I always think, oh, I should get some sort of piece of hardware, or I should get an MPC or something just to make these like extra little pieces on. And recently I've just been diving into the computer because I can do it inside of my house. I don't have to be out here. I can play with it. And what you just showed with the grid means that that's a really cool instrument for that as well that I haven't actually fully considered. Where you just made like a little beat where if you filtered that and looped it right, you've got a percussion top for your beat. Exactly. And so, I mean, that's a really cool instrument that you can now just record the audio from, and now you've got a loop.
And I think that's a huge point too, is because, ultimately I look at the grid as, it's another instrument. To me, it's the most sophisticated synthesizer that I've got amongst all the hardware that I have. And, I have, I mean, it's real because once you like dive into here, you think about it, ultimately, making a sound from anything, you just think about the signal flow. Where does the sound start from? What sort of path does it go through that will manipulate what's being generated? And as you can see, you can start with whatever, run it through all kinds of stuff until your CPU just blows up, right? And
yeah.
And as much as I play with this, like, even on the Surface Go, obviously the Surface Go is a very underpowered computer, but even then, I can push the grid really, really hard because from what I've seen, all this stuff is really efficient. You know what I mean? So it's to me, it's just dope to have that in a self-contained package that you can work on a laptop, but you don't have to feel like you're working specifically with a DAW. You can treat this just as another instrument, and then it becomes, it's a world unto itself.
Yeah,
that's dope. Well, I appreciate actually both of you all coming through, the expertise and familiarity that you all lend to this conversation, or that you all led with this conversation. This has been dope. Thavius, I love the fact that you were able to demonstrate some stuff for us. And, one of the points I wanted to make earlier in another conversation that we were having with this whole event is that, synthesis is not just Eurorack. You know what I mean? Even though a lot of us are into Eurorack, and that kind of is the sort of movement and flavor of the day right now. Synthesis is so much more than just Eurorack, and so it's good to know that there's a dope DAW out there that can handle it all. And even as it is by itself, it could be a powerful synth engine and just instrument altogether, along with being a DAW too. So thanks for demonstrating that for us, man. Appreciate it.
No, for sure. Yeah, no, my apologies for the extra audio. Like I said, I've just been like reconfiguring all my stuff. I got this circuit mono station. It's an amazing mono synth, and I just didn't realize that was actually being routed through.
Oh no, it's all good. It didn't happen.
That wasn't distracting at all. It's all good.
Okay,
Yeah, I
all right,
mean, we
beautiful.
still heard you, and it didn't happen for long. And for a while, I thought that was a part of the thing, but yeah, but still, I'm thankful that you came through and did that. This was a dope demo, and for anybody that wants to see more, you can go to Thavius's Instagram, and you can see there. I've been watching him for a couple of days playing with the grid and some other things. So be sure to go there and follow him, and yeah. So that is going to conclude this session, and thanks both of you for coming by. And
Thanks
the
for having
next
me, man.
session is let me see what the next session is here, because that's what's going to be starting like right about now. Shonda is going to be, it's the live performances with Synths and Eurorack. So go over to the SoCal Synth Society page and see what the next live video is. And we're going to keep this day moving. First of its kind virtual Synth conference. And we're glad that all y'all coming through to hang out with us. So thanks again, y'all.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Thank you, man.
cool. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, David.
And no worries. And congratulations, you guys, for making this happen. I think this is a beautiful thing. Everyone stay home, get some knowledge, geek out with your people.
Word up. All right, peace.
Peace, y'all.